This is part 68 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss non-action attribute in MVC. In an interview, an interviewer may ask you questions related to non-action attribute in many different forms. For example, they may ask you, what's the use of non-action attribute? Or, how do you restrict access to public methods in a controller? Let's try and understand the concepts related to non-action attribute so that we can answer these interview questions as efficiently as possible. We know that an action method is a public method in a controller that responds to a URL request. So by default, if you have any public method in a controller, then it can be invoked using a URL request. For example, here within the home controller, we've got two public methods, method 1, method 2. To invoke this method 1, we simply issue a URL request like this, /home/method1. Similarly, to invoke method 2, we issue a URL request like that, /home/method2. So by default, all public methods inside a controller respond to your URL request. Now let's say, for example, this method 2 is for doing some internal work, and we don't want end users invoking it by issuing URL requests. So how do we prevent that from happening? Simply decorate that with non-action attribute. Let's build the solution. Let's refresh this view. Look at that, we get an error stating the resource cannot be found, and that's because we have decorated that with non-action attribute. So we use non-action attribute to restrict access to public methods in a controller. And another way to restrict access to methods in a controller is by making them private. So if I remove this non-action attribute, since this is a public method, it will respond to a URL request. But then to prevent that from happening, we can simply make that private. So let's build the solution and let's refresh this view. Look at that, we get the same error, the resource cannot be found. But then in general, it's a very bad design to have a public method in a controller that is not an action method. If you have any such method, maybe for performing some business calculations, then it should be somewhere in the model and not in the controller. But however, if for some reason, if you want to have public methods in a controller and you don't want them to be treated as actions, then use non-action attribute. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.